Hi everyone, and welcome to Therapy Unfiltered. I'm Joe Valder, clinical counselor here, Counseling Services at Johnson & Wales University. On this show, we take the mystery out of mental health and help you understand what it's really like to sit on the couch. It's time to take a deep breath and dive in. Hello everyone, and welcome. This is Joe Valder again, clinical counselor at Johnson & Wales, and this is Therapy Unfiltered. And today, what we're going to do is take some time to introduce another one of the clinical counselors and also spend some time talking about, substance use and related challenges and also possible supports. And I must say, I am incredibly excited for the guest we have today. Huge friend of the show, and I can't think of another person better to have for today's topic and as just an opportunity to meet and become more comfortable with. And that would be, of course, Jocelynn Thommen.
Well, thank you so much, Joe. What an honor it is to be here, and what a warm welcome.
Hey, I pride myself in warm welcomes, so I hope you feel very welcome. But the first thing I wanted to do is just to introduce yourself a bit more and tell folks about yourself, is I wanted to note that you're actually rather new to Rhode Island.
Yes.
And so I was wondering, do you think you can tell us something about what you like about Rhode Island so far or what you've noticed?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not new to the New England area, but I've only been in Rhode Island for a little over a year. I grew up in New York, actually in a little beach town, and then I went to college in upstate New York, and then grad school in Boston. So one of the things that I really love about Rhode Island is that I feel like I can experience all of those environments in one day. I can be at the beach in South County in the morning and then go to an event in Boston in the evening and see some farm stands and hit the Roger Williams Park all in between that. And even though Rhode Island is so small, I haven't felt stuck in Rhode Island the way that I've felt limited in other areas that I've lived before.
Well, that sounds great, Jocelyn. I think that's what a lot of students have actually shared with me when I meet with folks, is I'll often ask them, what they like about Rhode Island as well. And also about you, can you tell us just about, those letters that come after your name and what that means, and maybe just a bit about your role here at Johnson & Wales?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am an LMHC, which stands for Licensed Mental Health Counselor, and that's similar to a social worker, or a clinical social worker. Lots of times our roles are interchangeable, and here at Johnson & Wales, I have the privilege of being our substance use counselor. And that doesn't mean that I work exclusively with students who are struggling with substance use, but it means that I am a designated source of support for those students who are. And I'm loving the role so far. I did not start at Johnson & Wales in this role, but I came into it at the start of the spring semester of last year. So just under a year.
Yeah, and I think you're doing a great job. It's been great having you on as a, specializing in that area. I think you're very resourceful and helpful. But speaking of substance abuse and substance use and whatnot, just want to note that it's a very big topic, of course. A lot of content there, a lot of information, and obviously in our, our little podcast here of about 15 or 20 minutes, I couldn't pretend to cover such content. So it'd be helpful to talk about a few different things with substance use.
Sure.
And of course to highlight too, how students can seek out support or help in that area. And so to start with that, I guess the question is, when is substance use a problem, or when should someone seek out support, would you say?
That is a great question, Joe. And I know I find with students that I see specifically for substance use, and you might find this with students you see who are not looking specifically for substance use support, everything is really on a spectrum. So what one person considers problematic due to physiological, behavioral, or even cultural, religious reasons might be different from someone who doesn't have those same beliefs. So we have to be really mindful and really person-centered, individualized when we're talking about change for substance use and what's problematic and what's not.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, Jocelyn. And of course, that's all part of the assessment which folks would engage in when they first come to see us. You know, Stephanie and I talked about that a bit in the previous episode. And sort of like you said, with it being person-centered, of course, it's related to where there might be impairments, where there might be problems.
Right.
Because of course a person could, maybe drink 2 beers over the weekend and have no issues at all. Mm-hmm. But then, it's possible another person drinks, just about the same amount or a bit more, of course, and experiences a variety of impairments.
Right. So let's talk about the definition of substance use, because I know before I even got into the field of counseling and I was in high school and sitting through those DARE courses and in health class talking about substance use and addiction and just say no, all that stuff. When I would hear the term substance use, I would immediately think of illicit drugs or partying, addiction. And fortunately, after several years of education and life experience, I've created a new working definition of substance use. And I see it more as a person who is engaging in an intentionally mind-altering event. So technically, having a glass of wine is considered substance use, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, that one glass of wine, it impairs the way that we think and feel. But what about doing cocaine? Does that feel like a different level of substance use to you?
I guess it does feel a bit different, yeah.
So cocaine is another mind-altering substance, but can't we say the same for caffeine, social media use, food, like binge eating and eating for emotional reasons, or pornography, or impulse buying and gambling?
Right, and that's where I think the definition gets a little hazy there,
Absolutely. So there's definitely a difference between substance use, substance abuse, and a physiological addiction. I do think that when we're talking about illicit substances, we need to consider the risk factor, because when we know that one beer or one glass of wine is regulated, we don't know what's happening to our bodies physiologically or otherwise when somebody's using an illicit substance. And typically that's where things start to get sticky, and the difference between substance use and substance use.
Right. No, and I think you're looking at like the outcomes basically and sort of what happens to somebody. And I think it's noteworthy here to mention that, part of that outcome is perhaps legal consequences, right? And kind of that's what it made me think of when you mentioned cocaine, of course, which is obviously an illegal substance.
Right.
But I just was thinking of it, as I used my beer example there, for someone over the age of 21. And obviously at Johnson & Wales, there's all the special parameters and rules about being able to have alcohol in your room and whatnot. But over 21, you can go to the bar and get a drink, right? And that's,
right.
In terms of the law, not a problem.
Legally and socially and even medically acceptable.
Right. But then if you're 20 and you do that same thing, you can, be arrested.
Exactly.
Right. And so that's, I think, an important component to consider when you're thinking about like outcomes and when is drinking or when is substance use a problem. Because a similar thing here with marijuana, a little more complicated because obviously it's legal in Rhode Island, but is not permissible on JWU's campus. And so if you're, smoking weed, using marijuana, whatever, obviously then there could be consequences and outcomes which could then perhaps result or present as substance, misuse, right?
Definitely. And if you look on JWU Link, we often post, our director, Stephanie, who was in your last episode, she will often post memes or infographics, just content that we've created. And some of those posts actually identify what the Rhode Island laws are. I think students and young adults, not just Johnson & Wales students or just college students, get themselves into trouble for not necessarily knowing what the laws and regulations and parameters are.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great resource, and it's noteworthy just to think about like substance use. So if you're, like I said, someone under 21, right, and you're engaging in drinking, and and then you're having consequences because of that, right? And you know the consequences. You know you could lose housing or even get kicked out of JWU or whatever it is,
Yep.
could be arrested, and you're aware of that, and yet you're still choosing to engage in these things in an unsafe way. That could be an indicator that perhaps there's a problem, right? Because you're making the mindful decision of, engaging in something that has detrimental consequences.
Absolutely. When we start to find relief in those risky behaviors, risky being I'm underage, so I'm going to use a fake ID to get into a bar so I can drink. Or another risky behavior is I'm going to gamble the limited amount of money that I have left. I'm 18, so I can buy a lottery ticket, but I'm also a college student with not a lot of extra money, so prioritizing that for the rush of gambling, that can lead to problematic consequences. That's risky.
Oh, certainly. And I think that's a good word to use here is the risk. It's like what level of risky behavior are you engaging in? And noteworthy here, because I think it's good to kind of focus in on when is it a problem? When should folks seek out support, And I think noteworthy here is other people around you might notice the risk and you might not, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
Someone in your family or your friends might be like, oh my goodness, you've missed all these classes, or you've been, you won't wake up in the morning from drinking the night before, you're missing this or that, or, social impairment, and all those things might be things that other folks notice and inform you of, right? And that could be, again, another indicator.
Definitely. I don't think there's ever been an instance where myself, who I like to think of as pretty introspective and have done a lot of work in a lot of areas in my many years on this planet, and I don't think I've ever initiated and said, I think I'm the problem here. It usually takes an outside mirror, a reflection of yourself to identify that this behavior that you're engaging in is not the healthiest choice for you or for your environment.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sorry to cut you off there, Jocelyn, but yeah, I just wanted to highlight again how great a point that I think that is.
Yeah.
And that's the importance as a person experiencing the challenges, but also as a friend to be, brave enough and to care enough about the folks in your friend group to go to them and be like, hey, I've noticed this change in you and I'm worried about you. And
Absolutely.
I think that's a real important thing to do.
So that's some advice that I like to give the students who come in to meet with me, and they say, someone has told me something about myself or my behaviors, and I don't know what to make of it. I like people to consider the source in which that statement is coming from. Let's say your doctor, your primary care physician that you meet with, says, hey, I just got your blood work back, and it seems like your liver enzymes are a bit high, and that indicates that you have created some liver damage. How much have you been drinking? Is this a problem? That doctor versus someone that you just met today saying, I think that drinking is bad. You've had one drink. You're a problematic drinker. You need to get that addressed. Let's consider the source.
Yeah, no, totally right. I think that's important as well. And that's, consider that too from a doctor or a family member or, close friend,
Right. And Johnson & Wales I find it to be such a wonderful university, partially because we get to work so closely with some of our other faculty members. We have chefs and instructors who contact, and people in residence halls contact us all the time saying that they've got a concern about a particular student. And when I see that a chef is concerned about one of their students, it makes me feel so good that there are well-educated people who have been through some of our mental health trainings and our QPR trainings who identify that there's a problem with this one particular student. And I know the resources that they can access on campus in order to get some sort of help.
Yeah, certainly. And another thing I think to look for in yourself, be it like gambling, like you mentioned before, or any drinking or smoking, whatever. But again, with friends, if you feel as though you can't tell folks the real numbers on things, like you can't tell someone how much you lost betting on football the last weekend, or perhaps you bet that the Jets would win a game, and obviously that was a big mistake. Spoken as a unfortunate Jets fan, of course. or perhaps you went out drinking and, your best friend or your girlfriend or boyfriend or whoever it is asked you about it, and you feel like you had like 5 or 6 shots or drank in real excess, and you tell them you had 2, right?
Right.
And so I think that's another marker to hold in yourself as like, if you're misrepresenting what you're doing, then, it tells you something, right?
Absolutely. We need to question, why am I behaving the way that I am? And that's not exclusively to substance use. That could be in all areas of my life. Why am I procrastinating this assignment? Why am I underrepresenting the risky decisions that I've been making recently?
Oh, yeah. No, I really love that. Like being curious about your own behavior, because I often think about being curious about why someone else does something that they do. But great point, Jocelyn, being curious as to your own change and wondering, what's this change about me? Like, what does it say about me and what's going on for me?
Right. And I would say that if somebody is hearing this and starts questioning, why am I behaving the way that I am? Please reach out to counseling services, especially if it's about substance use. I am happy to talk you through what that thinking process looks like if you consider yourself to have a substance use issue, if you've got a substance abuse problem, an addiction, if there needs to be a change, and what that change could look like for you from a professional standpoint, and also based on the feedback you've received from your friends or your grades, or reflecting on what some of your faculty members have shared with you.
Yeah, no, great point, Jocelyn. Like I said, we want to get folks up in the second floor of Wales Hall there as often as we can. Don't hesitate. Just come up, talk with us. And just again to highlight the confidentiality, because that's obviously important when it comes to substance use.
Right.
So everything that we talk about is protected unless there's like risk and safety issues. And also, feel free to come up to, if it's not yourself you're worried about, but a friend, and you're not sure what to do.
Absolutely. We offer consultations regularly. So that could be for substance use. It could be for something else, but we are always available to talk you through a concern of yours.
Certainly. And perhaps one of the last things I wanted to highlight too, related to substance use, is just the experience of perhaps using a substance to feel better, or to reduce stress, or to reduce anxiety. Or if someone says the only time I'm not depressed is when I'm drinking, things
Right.
like that.
And that's very common when people are coming to the realization that they're only feeling their best selves when they're under an influence. It's certainly time to seek some help. The way that works in our brain is we see something and we like it and we want more of it. That's happening on a chemical level. We've got serotonin, we've got dopamine receptors, and those are 2 little tiny pieces of our parts in our brain that when we see something that we like, or we experience something that we like, we get a good feeling from it. And when we're really stressed out, when we're not sleeping well, let's say it's been a tough week in the dining hall and we're not eating well, and we're in an argument with our significant other, or we got a bad test grade, or there's family stressors, we're not having as much serotonin and dopamine naturally created or used in our brains. Those are the chemicals that make us feel good. So then we have a drink. We know that alcohol, we know that illicit substances, we know that marijuana, just like food and sugar and pornography and gambling and impulse shopping, can boost our levels of serotonin and dopamine and make us feel really, really good in that moment. So that becomes a problem, because if we're only feeling good when we're getting that tiny high from one drink or one click on Amazon, then when we want to get happier, we can start using this as a vice, and it's a really slippery slope.
Exactly. And I think, and like we said before, then it becomes the issue of all those consequences, right?
Right.
And Jocelyn, I think that's a really good point to end on here, because like I said before, this is a huge topic. Certainly couldn't talk more about everything today.
Sure.
But perhaps, if you'd be so kind, you can come in again sometime and we can talk more about this stuff.
Yeah, that would be great. I've got things for the future that I would love to talk about. The idea of harm reduction and also some of the resources in the Providence area that can help you to either get clean or use your substance of choice in a safe way.
Oh my goodness, good points. You know what? I think it's official right now. This is a 2-part episode, Jocelyn. So you get ready. You'll be back in here, and we need to do a second part, I think.
I am looking forward to it. Thank you so much, Joe.
Well, thank you, and we'll see you all again.